Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you are having a great Sunday morning, I guess afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. Once again, my name is Jennifer. I will be your host for the next hour as we sit down and take a look into the world of esports media coverage and reporting. We'll also be talking um, to some of the great guests here, as you can see on screen with me. We'll explore kind of the role of media in the esports ecosystem, its impacts on the industry's growth, as well as some of the challenges on opportunities that it presents. So, without further ado, our panelists will introduce themselves and either tell everybody the origin story of their username or their favorite. I guess Orbital will start with you.
Alrighty. Hello, my name is Orbital. I am primarily a broadcaster and host and analyst for different esports events. But I do have some coverage experience with media and covering events as well as post-game analytics, so a little bit of behind the same. My username actually comes from losing my old handle and then, of course, getting a new one, but it's from my days as a street performer and I just really liked the name Orbital. And then, unfortunately, it has nothing to do with space, though. So, people ask me that every so often.
So I'll jump in next here. My name is Jackson, or my in-game name is Deprive. I got my in-game name Deprive from just back when I was playing Call of Duty as a kid. I thought it sounded cool, and pretty sleek, one word. So that's what I went with. But I'm 20 years old. I'm originally from Canada. I'm studying in Boston now at Fisher College, doing a lot with Fisher Esports and their program here now in the collegiate scene. But that being said, I'm mainly an FPS caster. I transitioned from being a Call of Duty player when I was in my teenage years now to going in being more of an FPS caster. And this past year, I've done a lot of cool collegiate stuff, including working with like ESL, Face It, and Red Bull. So a lot of cool events that I've done, and I'm super happy to chat about them.
Yeah, I guess I'll hop on next. My name is Benson. I go by PlebW. The origin of it is like basically I was playing CS:GO one day, and then I just typed in the name Pleb, and then accidentally had a uppercase W at the end. So I was like, I'll roll with it. Went too lazy to change it, and that's how I went on with the day. I spent the past 4 years at TMU, so Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson, doing everything from playing in collegiate, managing teams, coaching, and being the president for the past 2 years. So I graduated last week, so I'm out of the collegiate scene right now. But outside of that, I've been working with major esports groups around Toronto and Canada as well, such as Overactive Media, doing stuff with Toronto Ultra, Defiant, and even doing stuff with the city of Toronto themselves, so at government level as well. And in the past, I've previously played for G2 Esports under the Valorant team. I streamed for them as well for a year. I've done work with Team Dignitas and a bunch of other orgs in the scene. So happy to be here.
Wow, that is a lot you've done in a couple years.
Yeah,
um,
since I was 11, so
oh my god,
had a decade.
youngins getting involved in these. Oh god, so, anyways, okay, so Benson, we'll start with you. So congratulations, you just graduated from TMU. So I guess I want to know, like, what kind of motivated you to apply right out of high school, and then like, what do you want to do in the future now that you are some?
Yeah, so I went into TMU not wanting to get into the esports industry just because at the time, like 4 years ago, it was just a little like sketch. Like the collegiate scene was still like very underdeveloped at the time. So we were playing like $1,000 tournaments. We were winning them, but it was just like how sustainable is this ecosystem? And then about 2 years in, we really got ahead. Had like the Red Bull Gaming Hub developed and everything. And then that's how I kind of knew I wanted to get into collegiate and just like the esports scene in general. And then now that I'm graduated, probably just working the scene again, doing like consultation work that I've been doing for the past 2 years, and building up the Toronto scene because Toronto is really good in terms of like esports, and Canada is really like kind of like the underdog of esports events, for example. So it's really cool seeing more events come in here and really develop the scene here as well.
I guess what do you want? Or I guess like we'll just say like dream.
Like basically my dream job.
Sure.
I mean, ultimately, I think everyone just wants to own their org, like make a Toronto-based org that, actually functions well and also envelops all of Canada. Because I think realistically, Canada is probably one of the top contenders in esports, I'd say. So having a actual like Canadian org that's backed up. Because right now, if you look at like CDL, like Overwatch League is just Toronto, right? We want more like Vancouver Titans and stuff like that. We want a more nationally based org rather than the city based ones.
Okay, we'll pass this. Tell us all a little bit about the history of like how you kind of got to become director Fisher.
So it's actually pretty interesting. So obviously we're on a Canadian panel here. I'm from Canada, but I actually graduated from St. Clair College back last year. So I got my associates at St. Clair, and then now I'm off to Boston. It's actually pretty interesting because I was planning on going back to St. Clair for a third year, and then I heard an opportunity arise for Fisher. Their director, Brian Hummel, he's a great guy. He's like, hey, we need a broadcast director. It's something we don't have. It's a big gap. And St. Clair just won NACE Production of the Year that weird year. I was on every one of their casts on the show every single day, pretty much day in and day out. And so I got an offer to come to Fisher on a large scholarship and move down to Boston. And, you know, as Pleb mentioned, he's working on building up the Canadian scene. Basically, I wanted to grow my resume a little bit, get my bachelor's, and I felt like there was more competition going down in the States right now. So I still I love supporting the Canadian scene and doing all of that. But this is where I came to really build my resume, build up my portfolio, and kind of get a head start and jump on my career. So I'm heading into my senior year now at Fisher as that broadcasting and marketing director. But I could definitely see myself at Fisher longer than just this year in a staffing position.
So I guess as their marketing, what are kind of some of your day-to-day, daily things
Sorry, was this me or Orbital?
for you?
Okay, awesome. So my day-to-day things that I do here at Fisher on just a typical Monday, you come in. So the biggest thing is making sure on a Sunday is setting up who I do have for my week. Like, okay, here's my caster's availability, here's my producer's availability, here's my observer's availability, and then I go through and look at our team schedule. All of our teams that we cover here at Fisher, I check off. I'm like, okay, you know, these are our best games. You know, if we have a Fisher versus Northwood, then I'm throwing that on the stream for sure. You know, something like that. So I go through, select the best games. I find the casters that I want for them, find the producers, find the observers, select them on that. And then, you know, we kind of go through, do the standard stuff where you set up for the broadcast, go live, you know, you do your pregame, do your postgame, just a pretty standard collegiate broadcast in that manner. But then it also comes on the whole other role of the marketing director side of things. And there I'll be posting our game day graphics, posting our tweets, posting clips while live if I can. So many things here that encompass it. Fisher's actually a first year program, so we haven't been able to have, you know, tons of people in our marketing and broadcast department like we will have this upcoming fall. So it was really trying to just make things work this past year. So I'm super excited to just jump into September. I know I have a much larger staff coming in, and I can do so much more with it.
Oh, that's awesome to hear that kind of Fisher is getting off on a really good start for your second program, second. Um, yeah, so I don't think a lot of people know kind of what goes on in the background of content creation and production. So Orbital, can you kind of describe for us a bit of process like going researching, content creation, article, whatever media encompasses?
Yeah, when it comes to production side, at least, it's actually very intertwined with the media output, right? So for any event such as, I think the easiest would be like a LAN. You're talking maybe something like DreamHack or something like that. It's like a very, very big event. The amount of traction that actually comes in to the broadcasts that go out, such as the tournaments that are being shown, yes, the hype matches are there, but if there is no actual media coverage by it beforehand, such as, you know, weeks to months out prior, no one's really going to know about it. So for the media side of it, it's researching the teams, getting background on the teams, and being able to output that in either an article format, in the form of interviews, in the form of social media posts as well, at just like a very base level, you know, daily, weekly media output posts, and then also post event. Production side of things, you know, wrap ups, you know, post game interviews, and, you know, sit down recaps and all that. All those to me are considered inside the esports media scopes that give light to not just the players but the production staff as well as anyone doing the interviews and, you know, the hosts of the event as well. So when it comes to the production of a broadcast, how impactful we can be is only exemplified and amplified by how much media coverage goes in and how um, I would say how accurate they are and how well they portray this event, whether it be in a good or bad light. And honestly, how we talk about on broadcast a lot of the time also comes from how the teams and players in the event is actually covered beforehand. If there's a certain matchup like Deprive was talking about, Northwood, if they're talking about Northwood, on broadcast we're even talking about that a majority share of the time. So for the media side of things, they dictate a lot of what production and the broadcast gets to talk about on air.
And then I guess this is kind of open for everybody to answer. I guess when you're making, you are trying to advertise, I guess, what are best avenues to do that, to make it both publicly what you're doing, but also make sure that you're building that meaningful connection with players, and really most importantly, the fans that are watching.
Yeah, so I'll start us off here with just building the connections through broadcasting with players, with fans, and I think a lot of it is honestly just coming down to consistency, being on the air every single night, being there and having a routine that fans can watch, having something that like if you can become a routine in somebody's everyday life to get home, turn on the channel, turn on that broadcast. And to see these faces, see these players, it not only builds connections for that fans back home, it also builds connections for these players who know that they're every night they can get broadcasted. Every night they know that at least when they have a good game, they're going to get broadcasted. So it really helps build connections here between the fans and the players. It allows these fans to actually follow these players more. These players sometimes might not have had all these games streamed in their earlier careers, but now coming into collegiate or whatever it is, you can actually get more eyes on you and you can actually connect with the fans being like, after the game, you can go, oh, hey, did you go see my sick play here in this game? Like, and they'll be like, yes, so there's a lot of cool things that go on with that. I'm sure Benson, Daniel can build on to what I'm mentioning here now, but I think that just broadcasting in general and being consistent with it really helps out in that manner.
Yeah, and I think it's just all about like consistency, is what Brad said. And also just like building like kind of like brand loyalty, because I think that collegiate's such a strange spot compared to the US, for example, where collegiate in Canada is very your 4 years are done, leave kind of deal, and there's not really some sort of fan culture developed around the scene compared to the US that I've been seeing. Because Canada doesn't really have a developed collegiate scene right now in terms of scholarships and funding and everything. So um building kind of like value for like players and stuff, and building value for community is really good, because stuff like CIE, for example, is what consistency needs in the scene, and then building upon having constant exposure to events, tournaments, and just being a player is the best part, because if you provide these opportunities, they're going to take it. If they don't take it, that's on them to not grow their brand and grow their communities and grow their career in esports. But if you give them these opportunities, they'll definitely excel and whatnot, and that's kind of what's needed. Consistency, growth, and personal development.
And that encompasses a lot more of not just at the collegiate level, the high school to collegiate. It's even starting as early as middle school now. Around the U.S. side of things, as well as in other countries, we're starting to see middle school leagues pop up. Yes, it's still there. There are some pros and cons to it that a lot of the parents of the kids will also talk about. But it's just like any other sports outlet. You now take a look in regular sports such as baseball, soccer, football for them, and then United States football and all that, American football. You now see elementary school and middle school highlight reels. There have been talks even in regular sports of people really being concerned about it, because it's also having an impact on how some of these players are seen. Before it used to be, if you're the strongest, these scouts will come find you, or these people will reach out. Nowadays, it's actually, if you have a good highlight reel, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're most likely going to be picked up. It's starting to become almost a priority as well. So getting on, creating and constantly reaching out, creating as Pleb actually said, is your brand recognition, your individuality in the scene is becoming more and more prominent, and it's actually now, I would say, one of the pillars or foundations of your entire career in esports.
Yeah, and just some proof in the pudding, even on top of what Daniel was just saying, is I actually just got back from a high school tournament, and it was called a Stay Plugged In scouting event. Just for colleges would go. There was about 10 to 15 colleges there, and it was a Stay Plugged In high school event in Connecticut. And it was like, all the colleges go there. They walk around. You have scout badges on. Like it's comparing it to the traditional sports isn't crazy anymore when it comes to scouting high school talent. We're starting to see it more and more every year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way Canada's also heading. I know there are some schools who headhunt in a positive way, I'll say, for some of their players, which is really cool to see. But if anyone is interested more in kind of the middle school, high school, and I guess really gaming of all ages, we do have our esports at all ages, and then we'll also have our PSR esports secondary pack that'll dive a bit more into the collegiate scene, what they're doing, and how we're all kind of trying to just uplift Canadian esports as a general. Because I think we definitely do compete with the US just a little bit more. But kind of on the back of all of that, what are some of the challenges you've all faced while covering Benson?
Fun one. Pleb, do you want to take it first?
You can go ahead first. Yeah, I'm still
Okay,
thinking about it.
okay. You're passing it back. I got you.
Yeah.
So a little bit contrary to the rest, Deprive and Pleb are obviously very, very in tune with this. For me, it's actually coming from an outside perspective in terms of the broadcast side. I am pretty much just a caster. That's all I really am. And so I can even kind of say from my side of things for coverage and how to actually break in, it can be extremely challenging because how you word things and how you phrase things is very, very important. And this is actually more just from a coverage side. I wouldn't say my own individual brand, but how you portray things in the media is very, very important. And how you bring it about, such as are you critiquing? Are you going to be known as a critique, as an analyst or anything like that? These brand things, at least to me, can be quite important. And the difficulties is finding your own niche inside of that area. Are you going to be that hyper analytical, that critic that always goes after certain people? Because if that's what you want to do, you got to like 100% zone into it, right? That's one of the things about esports is you have to have that kind of uniqueness to yourself. When it comes to uh, esports specifically, you have to be extra careful, I feel, because it's still a blooming world. In regular sports, there are critiques. There are all those coverage spaces already that are like, yeah, we're gonna hard critique this guy. He batted, 0.25 instead of 0.33, and now he's sinking his team. It's already a well-known fact that you can do that. But in esports, you have to traverse very, very carefully because of the spotlight that's on there. If you critique a little bit too hard, people are going to come after you. You're flaming someone, you're being toxic, and everything like that. And so, learning how to word and phrase things, especially as a broadcaster, especially as someone that is meant to be the face for 90% of these broadcaster for these leagues, you have to be careful because I've known plenty of people that specifically reach out to broadcast and like, hey, we just don't want to be on air anymore. This caster was just a little bit too rough, and our players don't really enjoy it, and we prefer not to. The language that we use, yes, it seems like it's very easy, but in terms of sports versus esports, I would say esports, we have to be a little more delicate while still having that same critical, realistic output while we're on air.
Yeah, especially when I was first learning how to actually like cast and just do more production in general. I felt like at the very beginning, going from code switching to talking in your everyday life, talking in Discord with your friends, to actually going and being on the mic in front of people, having a job to do. At first, I felt like I was walking on eggshells a little bit. I was like, okay,
Yep.
what am I able to say? What am I not able to say? All this kind of stuff. And then you kind of find your way. So it definitely does get easier on the casting standpoint as you go on, learning what you can and what you can't say. And just not what you can't, what you should or shouldn't, I guess,
Yeah.
per se. But that being said, that is one of the biggest challenges here for sure. And then obviously another thing too is like, being getting overcoming the challenge of being camera shy of some kind, like not camera shy, but just having, let's say you're like, oh, we're going on a channel, we get 10 to 15 viewers every night, and then one night you're doing a playoff game and it shoots up to 150. Are you prepared for that? Are you ready for that? So that's one thing. When I first started casting as well, is casters, even yourself, you might face a lot of feedback from the chat. They might be like, oh, this caster sucks, he's brutal, like whatever, right? So I always recommend to people just starting getting into casting is don't look at that chat. Don't look at it
100%,
at all. I mean,
100%.
just go. Even now, even if you're 10 years down the line, don't look at the chat. I mean, but that being said, when you're first learning, don't listen to people. Like obviously take the constructive criticism, any advice, take that to heart. But don't let people get under your skin too much.
Yeah, and kind of like bouncing back to that is like you can't control everything. Like you can't control what Twitch chat says. You can't control what people on social media are saying. It's like so important that you can't like zone people out. Not intentionally, because sometimes feedback is good, but there's some things that people can't control. That's why I see people on Twitter have outbursts when a caster says something negative. But realistically, what else can be done, right? The space is still very new and like people are still learning how to behave. So kind of being ahead of yourself and just focusing on yourself is better, because so many people are complaining on Twitter and in Twitch chat. But realistically, if you're doing your job fine, you're getting these positions, you're getting these opportunities, you're definitely doing something right. So just like focusing on yourself is good.
I think there was something that I feel was very important that Deprive you actually tapped on, that I was on an earlier panel with Rare Adam for the Casting 101, and I think it was very, very important, is don't read Twitch chat. Don't look at Twitch chat. Don't say anything. Yes, Deprive, I had to bring it back because, man, you guys had some fun there. But there was something to be said about that. I've been casting for about 8.5 years. I started out on LAN, in front of a decent amount of people, and then just overall different types of broadcasts. Um, I have never once actually ever read Twitch chat. I first heard it, and I personally knew that myself and how I act and how I cast, there's going to be negativity. And I made it a priority to just never read Twitch chat. It was one of the first steps I ever took, because it can actually affect you midway through the game as well.
Oh yeah.
It's so dangerous. And even player count. I don't look at player count until someone in production actually tells me, hey, you need to mention that we actually have a lot of new people watching, or so in that. You try and tune it out at points. But the other side of it is, the second part to that I really want to say, is the critiquing factor. Never take it at face value is what I would say. Critique is good. Critique is important. Critique is necessary. But just as everything else, don't take it at face value and always look at it from another perspective. Why did they say this is bad? If they just said it's bad, dive into it. Why did they say it's bad? Is it actually relevant to my own style? Is it something that is a personal preference to them? Or an actual hardcore critique, like, did I misspeak, the information getting out? So learning about the critiques as well is another part of esports media, and learning how to be in this space.
I really see that. I think the casters sometimes have it the hardest because they'll missay something and the entirety chat will be like, you said that wrong. Um, which is like, maybe be a little bit nicer to some of our casters. They're trying their best. Some of our productions, they're trying their best. But that I think that definitely is really important. It's kind of have a bit of a thick skin in the industry. Um, People will complain for the sake of complaining, but also sometimes you take some of that back and look through it. That's the only way we develop. But speaking a bit of like keeping your safe procedures, we'll say, I guess for Benson, how important is it to you to kind of address topics like player mental health, diversity, and inclusive within this industry? Because it can be quite harsh at times.
Yeah, it's definitely a priority for every single organization, like every single tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, streamers, content creators. It's always a major focal point that needs to be addressed immediately, especially when you're building stuff that involves like community, um, like collegiate schools, for example. It's a really major part that always seems to be showcased, and you can tell why it needs to be showcased, because if you look online on the sports industry, it's so mixed opinions, right? People are being like transphobic right now to casters and the Overwatch League, for example. Stuff like that shouldn't be happening in a scene that thrives on inclusivity, diversity, and whatnot, right? And it's really strange to me, because it just like, you know, it's such a major part of the community that's just highlighting everything, but you still get these people tweeting and they're getting like tens of thousands of likes, being homophobic, transphobic, and stuff like that. So it's definitely far from perfect. And I think that as stuff progresses, it'll definitely improve. But overall, I think the industry is just still coming from the grassroots of, hey, we're like hardcore gamers, we're coming people playing the games are like 8-10 years old, influenced by content creators that might not be the best influences, right? So definitely building and working towards making that a core strength of the pillar, which I know is happening behind the scenes right now at every single organization. It's still inspiring to see that, but at the same time, growth needs to happen at the community and the public level before it progresses even further here.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on real quick is Matt's question in chat about asking, is a degree or education in a relevant field essential to getting into professional gigs, or is it still predominantly foot in the door industry? And if not, how about in the future? I think that one's actually really interesting because I was torn about this myself. When I was finishing up my associates at St. Clair, I was really debating between the two paths of going and pursuing a bachelor's and going and doing freelance gigs all the time. And so I'm actually really good friends. There's a Call of Duty caster. His name is Seymour. Some of you might know him from the Canadian scene. So he was actually, I graduated 1 year after him, and we were both going through the same path. He decided to go through the freelance path of things, and I decided to go to more of a bachelor's standpoint side of things. I think both are great. I think both are good ideas. The bachelor side of thing, the reason I did this one in specific is because I wanted to work in higher education doing broadcasting. I wanted to continue to work in collegiate, and usually working at colleges, usually working at universities, bachelor's is more required or more sought after than what you might see. But I'd say for most of your gigs, as in, freelance casting gigs, you want to go and you want to work for, the top S tier leagues, Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, you want to cast Blast Premier, CSGO, whatever it may be, VCT, you don't need a degree for that. It really comes down to your experience. It really comes down to, how enthusiastic, how much you can draw viewers' attention in. I think a really big thing is I learned so much from casting going to college, though. I learned a lot from not just casting in the esports broadcast room. I learned a lot from public speaking classes. I learned a lot from, business writing classes, just knowing how I can land gigs by emailing companies, sounding professional, all this kind of stuff. There is all these extra little things that, can help by going to school. But I'd say to get to, an S tier cast or to get to a lot of these casts, you don't need a degree. It's only for certain things.
And actually, tying into that, I am fully freelance. So I know I talked about a little bit that I went to, I've been to college and everything, but I don't have a degree. I went for 3 years, unfortunately dropped out. Maybe someday I go back into it, but almost all of my casting has been straight up freelance. I go out, try and grab gigs. And honestly, I would say it depends on what area you're going into. I know, Deprive, you definitely touched on the casting side of it. It is very fair. It's more like who you know, how you know them, how you're able to actually talk with them, show your skills and your activity level and your enthusiasm to be a part of it. Talking about observing and even the producer side of things, that can be the same. Or if you're trying to be a social media manager or anything like that. But there are so many different ways that you actually have to almost research. You have to dive into it, and that also goes into your mental well-being and the inclusivity factor as well. Is when I think, at least in my when I was in college years, it allowed me to become more open to the diversity factor, right? Meeting so many other people, whereas if I'm only going gig to gig, I don't get as much exposure to people as I would think. For me, being able to have an actual space where I get to meet, talk, and communicate with people on a face-to-face level outside of esports, I think was also integral for me to why I'm still in this scene to begin with. I wish I had done more of it while I was in the years, but I think it's important to discuss that as well. So I love whoever asked that question for sure, and the fact that we are on this topic of the mental health and the difference between college or degree or no degree. I think is fantastic.
That all does tie back to the origins of this industry. Is sometimes if you just have a passion, not that you shouldn't go to school, you should definitely go to school, but there are always pathways back to doing, and sometimes they're a little harder to follow, but other times it happens a little bit naturally, and it's just it's just the way it is. That's life, and there's something really really cool about that. But speaking of successes and stuff, I think each of you've had a bit of that growing presence over the last years. I know I've not been stalking, I've been watching a little bit, so I guess what skills do you each think are, or I guess skills or qualities do you think are really essential for maybe some of your success, but just I guess for other people to kind of look to, I guess, I don't know what I'm saying, to look to kind of increase, their knowledge or aptitude for.
Yeah, one of the things I would say that really just helped grow me in the right direction was building connections. Connections are king, I feel like, at the end of the day, in a lot of ways. If you know a lot of people around the scene, if you know people who can help you get gigs, if you know things like just the biggest thing is just being able to talk to people. Never burn a bridge. If you can always make sure that you have somebody here, that person might come up to you 2 years later with a gig. They might be someone you never thought would come to you with a gig, but then 2 years later, here you are with a good casting gig because of that. I think that is something that's very big to touch on. Is that how I've found a lot of my success in my industry, and just like being a caster, doing marketing, all this kind of stuff in the collegiate side of things has just been connections. I would have never been contacted by Fisher if I didn't have a connection through Fisher. So things like that just come through being open, talking to people, expressing your goals. And, if you can find someone with goals that align as well, maybe work on with something if you can, keep on, connecting with them and whatnot in that manner.
Yeah. And then for me, like building connections is like one of the strongest things. I'd say that's like the number one out of top three, things that you really need skills for. And then one of the other top ones I'd say is definitely gaining experience in everything, because especially in the esports industry, there's no such thing as, a specialized person in one kind of path. You had to kind of be a Swiss Army knife and, learn about different areas. Because right now you're seeing like social media managers get fired because they can't do graphic design on the side, right? But companies are hiring people that can flex their positions and whatnot, and having that multitude of experience in a path that you want is really essential right now. From at least what I'm seeing in the industry is that people want people that can learn in their job and also gain experience in the company overall and stuff like that. That's why you're seeing, graphic designers how to do social media work, edit TikToks, edit videos, stuff like that. People are now looking for specialized people in the industry, because esports is such a developing industry that everyone wants to get a part of it, but there's no specialized path for it. For example, there's no casting degree for like, but if you took like a broadcasting course at school, you might have a little advantage, right? And it's really crucial because, especially at a collegiate level right now, you're seeing these degrees pop up, but at the same time, how many of those will actually be put into effect, right? You're going to have 100 people graduating with an esports management degree, but how many of those people will get hired full time or have a job that can actually sustain themselves, right? And it's becoming such a overloaded pool of candidates that as soon as you start sticking out and developing your own niche and developing your own set of skills, you won't get noticed, because you're just gonna be like, hey, I can do social media. So can these 200 other people. I can do social media, editing, motion graphics, 3D, VFX, everything. If you say that, definitely hired, right? So that's one of the most key crucial skills, and developing connections is the best way to do that. You can talk to the production manager for this company, the social media manager for this company, and once you build that connection network, you'll just keep growing and feeding and growing yourself and making yourself the ultimate, esports person overall.
Yeah, going off of what you mentioned, Benson, is I actually graduated Sinclair with an esports and gaming administration degree. Exactly what you were saying. There's a large pool of those kids here now. And, I think I graduated with about 40 people in my program, but you only see now, 6, 7 who are working with, colleges in the future with esports, whether they're working with, just anything in general. They still working in esports, building an income, or just doing, pursuing their future in esports. And truthfully, I think ultimately, like you mentioned, it's these companies, they're looking for people that are more well-rounded, and being well-rounded is really more beneficial, as just any candidate. You see more and more esports and gaming administration curriculums popping up all over. I've seen a ton in the US here now. I know there was a few in Canada. But I will say the whole reason I went to college in the first place was because there was that program in place. I don't think I would have went to college if it wasn't for an esports and gaming administration program. So I think that pathway is amazing for some kids, but I know some other kids who took that program and went back and said, hey, I wish I went to school for maybe a business or a graphic design, a specific course, and then got involved with the varsity esports program on the outside of things. Not saying that the esports and gaming administration program is, not useful. I just think that, you really got to align what you're looking to do here in esports after graduating, and then really hone in on that one thing, and then focus on some other skills as well on the round side, like the outside. If you say, you want to be a social media manager, focus on social media management, focus on marketing, and then on the side, like you mentioned, focus on your little bit of graphic design, focus on a little bit of editing, focus on a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think all around can encompass you. But the big thing is I thought was really interesting was how you talked about how there was the pool of, maybe 100 kids with esports and gaming administration, graduates. You got to differentiate yourself somehow by getting involved.
I would also like to just add on the point, even if you know what you think you're going into, even if you have a good idea, flex out. I know everyone's been talking about, you should be multi-talented, but also be looking in different directions for your aspirations and your goals. Do not set only one goal. If you sit there and say, I want to be a caster, that's great. That's perfect. But look at other options. Hey, maybe you could be an observer. Maybe you could be a producer. Maybe you could be a social media manager. Maybe you could be a head of a team or anything like that. Don't limit yourself to just one. And that's also why I think a lot of these skill sets are important, because it helps you as the esports scene continues to grow and expand and become much more deep and encompass a wider range of professional opportunities. You may find that your passion switches. So be flexible, be open, and always be looking to what your passion is. Don't feel bad about switching, is all I would say. Like, find what you enjoy. That might be something different year to year.
Yeah, actually, touching on that though, we did have a audience, a submission question. If you want to Google Forms, by the way, that is still open. If you ask a question either in chat now or um, for some of our later on panels. But someone was asking, it says, "Hi, I am not in school right now, but I want to get involved in esports, but don't know where to start. I like doing social media, TikToks, but I feel like I'm some random kid that nobody knows about. What do I do?"
Uh,
Ooh.
yeah. Hey, honestly, they mentioned they were not in college right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, truthfully, I think college esports programs, even if you're not a student at the said school, would always encompass allowing like volunteers and things like that. So obviously, might depend on the school, but if you message like 10 schools esports programs, if you want to get involved in a school's varsity esports program or just a school in general, a lot of schools and esports varsity esports programs are looking for volunteers to help out. I know I would have loved an extra hand on my social media team this year. So things like that, if you just reach out to schools, I feel like that is one way. Just being like, hey, I'm not crazy experienced, but I'd love to learn under someone's wing, maybe, and take away some things from it. And that's just one thing that can instantly get put on the resume. Another thing is that you could always like start your own project of some kind, and just learn from it. I know that I learned a lot from gaming and marketing and all this esports kind of stuff was just starting my own org and seeing kind of where it took me.
I would also
Yeah,
say,
and yeah,
oh,
go
go
ahead
ahead,
first.
Pleb.
Oh yeah, no worries. So I'm just gonna say, like, I came from that, perspective. I was an 11-year-old kid 11 years ago, and I wanted to get in esports industry, but I was 11 years old. I couldn't, apply to actual professional jobs. So I did the next best thing, which was go on Facebook. Back in the day, you can only find events through like Facebook and stuff like that. Search esports events in Toronto locally, and just spam email, spam message the tournament organizer saying, "Hey, I know I'm 11 years old, but I play a lot of games. I have a lot of experience playing games. Like, do you want me to volunteer for something?" And some of them will suck. One of my early tournament volunteer things was I was just like the Hearthstone admin. I sat on a table for 8 hours, didn't move a single inch, just monitored and made sure people were in lobbies and stuff like that. Some of it sucked and was really boring, but I kept developing these skills. And going back to the previous questions about connections, that's how I got so many connections, because some of these people I worked with in the past are now tournament organizers for like Riot and stuff like that, and they keep me in the loop because they're like, "Hey, I know you 10 years ago, you're that 11-year-old kid, and now you're graduating, you want to work for us," stuff like that. And getting into it, because like, even though it's volunteer work, probably won't get paid. It kind of sucks, but once you get that level of experience and like thick skin, people really start to notice that. And volunteering at collegiate level is such a amazing part, because I know every single college, university has a gaming club, has an esports club. Get involved through that way, and even at a high school level now, I know that Canada might not be as developed as the U.S., but just even doing stuff online, because now everyone's connecting through Twitter, everyone's connecting through Discord. So find a way to get in, and then just keep trying at it. And don't think you're going to get into a specific industry like social media. Sometimes you might love video editing, for example, or you might like managing a team. You never know where it's going to take you, and sample everything. Esports is such a big industry. And if you ask anyone in like high level executive positions, they came from varying degrees of education and varying degrees of industry. Like the best example was like the caster medic. Imagine having a PhD and a master's in like, doing doctor stuff, and then also switching to casting. So follow what you think is best and most fun for you as well. Because esports is one of the most enjoyable industries I've been a part of, just because of how unique and diverse you get to interact with. Like, it's really fun overall.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, connections and kind of hot dropping mail is good, but at the same time, feel free if you don't have a direction and you feel like collegiate is far off, then start small. Start with building your own brand as well. Start laying down the pathwork, especially since I think they were talking about a little bit that they were video editing and trying to create social media stuff and just wondering how to do that. One of the things that I've seen some people do, they just become a fan of a team and they make content around this team and just show that they can kind of boost this team's social even without them needing to. But it just shows that you are able to perform these tasks. It also gets you in the feel of how this is going to work, right? Whether it be editing, highlight reels. The best thing that I think I've seen some people do, and you were talking, Pleb, about watching some of these people, go from just that one person at a table to being some of the top dogs in some of the areas. Someone I knew wanted to be a video editor, but they weren't sure how to get into it. Back in the day of CS:GO frag videos, they literally just made frag videos. All they did was just make random frag videos. They would pull random clips from certain players, and they just make videos. And now they can send that portfolio out and be like, "Yo, this is also what I can do. Like, if I want to get in the door, I can now show these things." And so, even if you are not getting responses, because also we talked about it a bit, the field is getting saturated. Esports is getting saturated. That cannot be denied. To set yourself apart, you can't just be trying to get in contact with people. You have to show that you have experience in it as well. So feel free, just go crazy. Find a random team that you want to enjoy, or find random moments throughout some of these leagues. Have fun with it. Pop up on social media if that's your thing. If you're in video editing, edit some of those games as well. Maybe tag the creator in it. Tag the league. Hey, Overwatch League, look what I did. Right, some things like that. Just not just reaching out, but feel free to expand your own brand in that way as well.
I think um, I come from physiology. My degree is very far off of everything sports, but sometimes you just start building skills outside of your school, and you don't need schools for that. But schools are a really good resources. I know a lot of the clubs are typically very willing to have conversation with, even if you're some random kid, it's okay. A lot of us are very willing to have conversation, even help guide you in some of the directions. If you're asking for work, well, how about you try this, you try that, and because it's I think the beauty of our industry is that we are very helpful towards each other, and we're very inclusive in the sense of if you want to get in and I can help you and you can develop, I'll do that for you. That's no skin off my back. It's not as I would argue that it's not as competitive and cutthroat as some of the other industries. And kind of on the second note, I know there are um, video editors specifically who will go do those highlights, and I think it was Valkyrie's um, stream where she was like, "Yeah, someone was doing a bunch of art and like little cute animated videos," and I said, "Hey, I saw them. They're cool. Can I hire you?" And so now they're working for Valkyrie, one of the biggest streamers out there. So it's do what you do what you love, and it may lead you. Cool. um, I know that sounds really glamorous and it's pipe dreamy, but for all of you, what are I would say the most overrated and underrated parts of being where you are now? If you're allowed to say, you don't have to answer that if you don't want to, if it'll get you in trouble.
Oh, oh. This is akin to the question of, what other embarrassing moments have you had as a caster, I feel, that you asked on the other. Like, oh man, huh?
Yeah, we got to get a little bit of the drama into this. This
Oh man, you give each of us an hour, I'm sure we could go on and on, right? Like, oh my gosh.
I think
Anyone want to first?
can I go? I just want to say one thing that I always get so hyped And like I think one of the most underrated moments of where you're at is when you're like got a gig and you're like, it's like a gig that's actually like a LAN and you're traveling to it and you're in the car and you're blasting your music or whatever. I think that is the most like underrated feeling, is like as a caster.
Yes.
I don't even know how to like explain it, but just being hyped about a gig in general. Like I think that was like sort of my biggest gig I've had in the last year. Might have been Red Bull Campus Clutch Nationals in Texas. I casted that with a lot of people I'm literally watching on VCT Americas right now. So that is, I was flying to that plane. I was like blasting my music in my AirPods, and I was like, this is the dream, man. I was like 5 years ago. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what I did, but here I am, and it's one of the most underrated feelings.
Yeah. There's some fun moments all the way through. I would say underrated. Underrated at least in casting or just in esports in general, I think, is just finding people to actually connect with. I know that sounds all fruity and everything like that, but coming from someone, I mean, I don't know how old everyone is. I don't know how old everyone is that's also tuning in. I'm 30. When I started out in this industry back in my college years when I was 18, you were still being laughed at for playing video games. You were still made fun of. You weren't ever seen as something niche. And for me, just even online, just stepping in and finding someone that's literally like, oh, you play League too, and talking about it, talking about our favorite champions, or being able to meet someone in person and physically seeing them and going, we actually enjoy the same thing. It's a ridiculous feeling that I personally don't get to experience where I actually live, right? Like I live in the podunk middle of nowhere, as much as someone's gonna yell at me for that one too, but I do. And this area does not have a whole lot of esports favorited people. So to actually go out, I feel, at least personally, that is a very underrated thing that should really be treasured, I think. Overrated, I will say I have one, which is having social media or having yourself blow up somewhere. It's nice. It's a great feeling, yes, but it's there was something about it. It's just you don't have as much flair as you think it's going to have. It's like it's just a thing. It's just a thing that happens, and everyone makes it out to be like a crazy thing because it's like, oh, it opens so many doors. It's like it's just a thing nowadays.
Yeah. I think underrated for me is like going into events. Especially we did the Toronto Ultra Major 5 for Call of Duty League like a month or two back. And one of the underrated moments was I was literally just like, it was like a few hours before the doors open, and just being in like the production room and just walking around the venue completely empty, dead silent, but everything set up is like one of the best feelings. And it's surreal because these events you don't realize how close the esports community is, because I'm just chilling in the staff break room. Every single major caster, like Puckett, Alley Cat, like everyone's just walking through, all the players are going through like the venue and whatnot. And seeing them like in person is just surreal because you're just like, holy crap, I only see you on online and Twitch streams, and seeing them in person kind of breaks down that barrier because you realize we're still gamers, we have the same level of social skills, and it's amazing seeing stuff actually be put in reality, because a lot of people, they like kind of like idolize these people as celebrities and whatnot. But when you see them in person, they're super chill. Like the fact that I could walk on Yonge and Dundas Square dead of night at 9 p.m. I randomly see like Clayster, for example, just sitting by a street light alone. It's kind of funny and surreal. And I have two overrated things. The first one is that I don't know why in the esports industry, when people do IRL events, the default place to go to is Korean barbecue. There's no other spot that people go to, and I don't know why. There's better places. There's like Hot Pot, you can go to like taco place, you can go anywhere else, but everyone just goes to Korean barbecue. During the Call of Duty Major and the Toronto Defiant event, those places were packed for 2 hours straight, and I don't know why.
Gosh.
I'd say sushi is pretty popular. Sushi's pretty high up there too. I've seen on gaming events.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not
Sushi's
saying it's
pretty good,
overrated though, right? You're not saying sushi is
No,
overrated.
no. Sushi's not overrated. I'm just saying
all right,
that
all right.
like
We were gonna have beef if you were gonna say that. You and I were gonna have straight beef next time we meet, man.
I think that there's like three very basic esports LAN foods, and they're overrated because they're not like overrated in general, but they're overrated because of how much they're eaten on esports LANs. I don't think gamers like trying new things.
Yeah, exactly. We like one of the places near the venue we were at has one of the worst ramen places. But for the entire weekend, that place was packed like crazy. And then it's like a 4 out of 10 ramen. I would rather have instant noodles than that. And people, all the pros were going there like, oh my god, this ramen's so good. I'm like, Come on,
Oh
man. You
no.
gotta go somewhere else that's not next to the venue, right? So that's one of the overrated features for me. And the second one is just like, I don't know, just let go of ego sometimes. Talking to what Daniel said about, people making viral hits. Like, sure, your tweet got 200,000 views, but realistically, what does that do for you? Are you gonna put that on your resume that one of your tweets got like, I don't know. I've seen so many people at Lance, especially,
Mm.
like try to go up and like, yeah, I'm the guy responsible for that, but it's a tweet that people forgot about like years ago, right? So,
Wow.
just like elevating yourself, because like when you go to these lands, you want to be as humble as possible, right?
Mm.
Like even talking to like Puckett, for example, that guy's one of the most humble dudes ever in the esports industry. This guy would just go up to volunteers, start talking with them for 20 minutes, and then go back to casting the show, right? But when you see these people, they're like, "Hey, they don't introduce themselves. Hey, I'm the biggest caster ever in Call of Duty." They just kind of go like, "Hey, I'll just talk to you randomly, like you're a person, a human being," right? So seeing that's really interesting. And
Yeah. I actually have on top of that, you were talking about the Toronto Major 5. I actually was at the Toronto Major 5. Good stuff. I liked what you did there, Benson.
Yep.
But I did go to Toronto Major 4 as well. And I'm talking about, like you mentioned, you met Puckett at the Major 5 and you talked to him. And it's really cool to just talk to him like he's like, he's just like you at the end of the day. I had a very similar experience at Toronto Major 4 with Launders, the CSGO caster. He was actually there, and I was like, "Oh, what are the odds two CS:GO casters are at like a COD event right now and meet each other?" But I was like, it's really cool just being able to sit down and talk to those guys. And I had a very like humbling experience like you as well when you were mentioned that like you're walking through an empty venue. I did that at the Boston Breach Major this past year as well. I've done a lot of stuff with like Oxygen and Breach just because it's so close to home. And the Call of Duty orgs and the Overwatch orgs are actually very welcoming into extra help and volunteers and interns and all that kind of good stuff. So if you guys are looking to break into a scene, Call of Duty and Overwatch is a good place to go for that too. But like you were mentioning, it was so surreal. I was like just sitting in a chair, and next thing you know, I look up and I'm like, oh, it's Optic Scumpy. Like what the heck? Like it's just a very like unreal feeling. It's like, I went from being 11, 12 years old, staying up all night and watching this guy on TV playing CWL. And then now here we are 10 years later, the game is like franchised, and I'm sitting here watching him play for, Optic Chicago or whatever it may be, Optic Texas, right? So it's just been super unreal to be. That's one of the more underrated moments, like you mentioned as well, Benson.
I think it's actually it's a lot. Um, I'll say that yeah, events are like the pre-event, like just the calmness of everybody is just one of like the most eerie satisfying.
The calmness before the storm.
Until like, oh, we're ready to go. Power goes out. And you're like, okay. It's the
And then
calmness you
everyone's
need now to like not like self implode and be like, all right, everything's going wrong. Let's just cancel the event.
Yep.
Um,
Everyone's running and putting out fires very quickly. It's like, oh god, do I actually got to do this now?
oh, and then you have, production waiting and then players mad and then oh when it's all on Twitter and you're like, oh no. But
Yeah.
be nice to yourself sometimes. But actually, we did have another form submission, and this person wanted to know what is one thing you would want to tell your younger self back when you first got into esports.
Ooh.
I guess maybe Benson, I guess your 11-year-old self, because there's not much, I don't know what you can tell like 5-year-old you.
Yeah, like I honestly got no clue because like I myself back then I was just doing everything, but at the same time also just like focusing on yourself because I feel like some people when they really hone into a industry that is really unknown at the time, especially when I was 11, that was 2000 like what like 12 for example, you don't know what's coming next, and if you're focused entirely on that and you get sidetracked, you're kind of screwed. So like back when that was happening, I kind of gave up, my social life, for example. I was trying to go pro in CSGO, pro in Overwatch when that first came out. I got really high into it. And then I didn't realize I was sacrificing these things, right? And that's what a lot of people are trying to do right now. They're like, hey, I want to be viral on TikTok for, creating CSGO or Valorant montages, right? But they don't realize that there's more that needs to be done than just honing in on the specific thing. And that's what I tell my younger self, because overall, sure, the industry is very flexible and whatnot, but when you start realizing that you're not catching up to other things that you should be, then you're like, oh crap, I might not have gotten enough experience for this. I should have done that earlier, stuff like that. So once you trust your gut enough that you can have every task be simple, applied and like confident, then you can be relaxed. But until then, always keep track of what you're missing.
Yeah, I'd say on top of that, one thing that I wish I could tell my younger self at least was get more excited about the little things. Get more excited about the little wins here you might have. One of mine that I vividly remember was like making my first dollar in esports, and it was from a Minecraft Let's Play video on YouTube that I got monetized. So it's more or less things like that. Just like keep yourself motivated, right? And keep yourself motivated by being happy and excited about these little things. Whether it be, hey, I just landed my very first paid casting gig. Hey, it's only $5, but it's your first one. Be excited about it. Use it as like a confidence booster. Use it as a morale booster. And who knows? Maybe after that $5 game, say, hey, what can I do even better for next time? And then next thing you know, you're finding a $10 game or something like that. I don't know. You know what I mean? But I think that the biggest thing is just being able to, provide yourself with some confidence, and what you're doing is, actually good.
I have a little bit of different line, I think, and especially from the casting side of things. And this is almost purely from casting, or maybe in other forms of the industry. But if I could go back and say one thing, it would have to be: don't be afraid for people to hate you. Uh, Keep with yourself. One of the big things is I for as much as we live up and say we're all coworkers here, at the end of the day, we are also competitors. That's one of the difficult things to kind of talk about, and it's almost taboo to bring it up. But that's what we are. As much as some of us are friends, we are all competing for these things. We want to uplift each other, but it's still you do have to face reality, and some people go a little bit far with that. There are some situations that I've known specifically that I lost out because of such things, and to learn to not be disheartened by that is one of the skills that I would tell myself that I need to learn very quickly. There will be people that in the industry you may never ever meet in your life, and yet they somehow kind of enter into your area. Do not be afraid of that. Meet it head on, work through it, and know that more opportunities will come. Be willing to be willing to know that not everything is within your control. So control what you can to the best is what I would say.
Yeah, I think those are some actually good pieces, especially will be a little bit hard on themselves. But that kind of does bring us to about the end of our panel. Um, is there any kind of last words or advice? And if you'd like to give people watching, I guess, be watching replay.
I'll start off really quick as I sign off. I just want to say, firstly, thank you all so much for listening to all three of us, speak, chat about what we do, and kind of just like how you can maybe like improve or any things and tips. I love, and if you guys ever have any feedback for us, I'm speaking for myself here. Send it our way. I always appreciate it. Don't miss out. I'll be on another panel tomorrow as well. I believe it is tomorrow, or the next day. It is careers in esports. So catch me on that one once again. But that being said, that's all from me here on my end of things.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. Yeah, I mean, just follow the Canadian scene, because this is like the best example of what Canada can offer. We've seen the U.S. schools offer $5,000 scholarships. Team U, we haven't had a single scholarship yet, and we're still competing in the top leagues right now. And just supporting leagues is the best thing that can happen, because once we show the value of everything, we can bring up to sponsors like Dell, for example, which is really grateful to have. Just growing the scene in general, supporting Canada, supporting your local scenes, because at the end of the day, when you have a community, you want to support it locally, you want to support it in a way that is beneficial for everyone. So like growing the Toronto scene, growing the Vancouver scene, growing whichever city you're from, it's really important. And humbling yourself and knowing where you're from. And yeah, just keep up to date with everything. That's my word of advice for everyone trying to get into it. Also, don't slack on social media presence. I was one of those people that was like, I hate Twitter, I hate Instagram, I hate everything. And then that was when I was going like pro at the time on CSGO and Overwatch, and I didn't make any social accounts, so no one knew where to find me. But make those social presences known, because people slack on it, and then you're like, hey, I want to get into the esports collegiate space. How do I start? Twitter. Okay, how do I get in Twitter? You're kind of screwed from there. But yeah, just get into the space and see where it takes you.
Yeah, it's I want to say thank you to CIE and to tag along as well. This is something that I learned because I cover a lot of different games, and you know some of my friends that have been in the scene for so long, some of my coworkers that have been very focused on League or Valorant specifically. They are skyrocketing. They're on CVal. They're in the finals, and I'm it imposter syndrome is something that some people will get very used to after a while. But don't feel let down by your progress. Even though you feel other people might be passing you up, please always remember, kind of what Pleb said is remember where you came from. And not just that, remember a step forward, no matter how big or small it is still a step forward. As long as you enjoy the scene, as long as you love what you do, don't worry about how fast others progress. Don't worry about, what else happens. Enjoy the time that you have and be happy about the progress that you make every single day.
All right, on that, we are just out of time. So thank you, Orbital, Deprive, PlebW, for being on the panel with us. It was great to really hear a bit about the Esports Media, experience and all of that. So make sure you guys all keep up with their Twitters because we all know how important that is. They are in the chat now, so go follow them, support them. If you're looking for any opportunities as well, we'll have a chat with you. But we will be back in about a half hour at 1 p.m. East Coast with our last panel of the day, Subathon, creating your mark as a content creator, where we will be sitting down with Rambalime, Fly, Emily, and Nightflash.